They say hindsight is 20/20, but that's not quite true. Hindsight is more like watching a movie for the second time. You see all the clues you missed, all the foreshadowing you ignored, all the red flags that looked like romance through rose-colored glasses. Now, as I sit in my empty house reviewing security footage that spans 3 years of my life, I realize my husband wasn't just smart. He was brilliant, and I was his masterpiece of manipulation. But let me start at the beginning, before I knew I was part of an elaborate game. Before I understood that my perfect husband had spent years orchestrating my downfall. Michael and I met at a charity gala in Silicon Valley. He was already making waves as the CEO of a cybersecurity firm, and I was a marketing executive who thought she could read people. The irony of that still makes me laugh, though the sound has a bitter edge these days. Our courtship was a whirlwind of private jet trips, 5-star restaurants, and the kind of attention that makes you feel like the center of the universe. Michael noticed everything: my favorite wines, my perfume preferences, how I liked my coffee. He anticipated my needs before I even recognized them myself. I thought it was romance. Now I know it was reconnaissance. We married after 6 months. Too quick, my friends said. But Michael had a way of making impulsive decisions feel inevitable. The wedding was featured in Tech Monthly. Silicon Valley's power couple ties the knot. I still have the magazine somewhere, probably filed away with all the other evidence Michael wanted me to keep. The next 12 years were a masterclass in perceived perfection. Our modernist mansion in the hills had a view that made real estate agents weep. My closet was filled with designer clothes he surprised me with, just because. Our dinner parties were legendary in tech circles, and our charitable contributions made all the right headlines. Michael was the kind of husband other wives envied. He never forgot an anniversary. He brought me coffee in bed every morning, always at exactly 7:15 a.m., I realize now, like clockwork, like a programmed routine. He supported my decision to leave corporate life and start my own consulting firm. He even set up my home office, insisting on installing the computer systems himself. Trust me, he'd said with that smile I'd come to love. Security is my business. If I'm being honest, and I must be honest now, that's all I have left. There were signs. Tiny moments that should have made me question this perfect life. Like how he always seemed to know where I'd been, even when I hadn't told him. "How was lunch with Sarah?" he'd ask, on days I hadn't mentioned meeting my friend. He'd laugh when I looked surprised. "Lucky guess," he'd say, or "You mentioned it last week." Did I? I could never quite remember. Or the way he encouraged me to use his company's new social media platform, insisting it was more secure than the mainstream ones. "I just want to protect you," he'd say, his concern so genuine it made my heart ache. Protection. Another word I understand differently now. There were the gifts too. Not just the usual jewelry or designer items, but oddly specific things. A first edition of a book I'd only mentioned in passing. A painting by an artist I'd Googled once, late at night. At the time, it felt magical, like he could read my mind. I never questioned how a man who worked 14-hour days could be so attuned to my every whim. The cameras were my idea, ironically. After a break-in 2 houses down, I suggested installing a security system. Michael's eyes lit up in a way I'd never seen before. "Finally," he said. "I've been worried about your safety for years." He spent a weekend personally installing cameras throughout our house. For protection, of course. Always for protection. Our sex life was perfect too. Scheduled, I realize now. Like everything else. Tuesday and Saturday nights, like clockwork. Passionate enough to keep me satisfied. Controlled enough to keep me wanting more. Even our spontaneous encounters weren't spontaneous at all. I see that now. I've been staring at our wedding photo for hours as I write this. We look so happy. So in love. His hand is on my lower back, guiding me toward the camera. Always guiding me. Always directing my movements in ways so subtle I never felt the puppet strings. 3 months ago, everything changed. Or maybe nothing changed except my awareness. That's when Ryan started at Michael's company, and my perfect husband's perfect plan entered its final phase. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand exactly how perfect everything was, how completely I trusted him, to grasp the magnitude of what he orchestrated. Because the greatest trap isn't the one you walk into blindly, it's the one you live in for years, decorating its walls, inviting friends over, calling it home. What I didn't know then was that my loving husband had been watching me through more than just security cameras. He'd been studying me, learning me, cataloging every weakness and want. Not to make me happy, but to make me predictable. After all, you can't set a trap without knowing exactly how your target thinks. But we'll get to that part soon enough. Ryan entered my life like a character written specifically for my story. Because, as I would later learn, he was. But on that warm September evening at Michael's company gala, he just seemed like a breath of fresh air in my perfectly controlled world. I remember everything about that first meeting, though not for the reasons I thought at the time. I was wearing a black Valentino dress. A gift from Michael, because you deserve to be the most beautiful woman there. Ryan was standing by the wine bar, his tuxedo slightly too well fitted for a junior executive's salary. When I approached to get a drink, he accidentally spilled his champagne on my shoes. "I'm mortified," he said, dabbing at my feet with a napkin. "Please let me make it up to you." His eyes were the exact shade of green that I'd once told Michael was my weakness during one of our late-night conversations years ago. Funny how details like that come back to you later. Michael appeared just then, playing the gracious CEO. "I see you've met my wife, Ryan." The way he said it was perfect, just the right note of pride and possessiveness. "Ryan's our new head of client relations," he told me. "Harvard MBA, exceptional references. I think he'll be a perfect fit for our company culture." That night, I caught Ryan looking at me 7 times. I know because I counted, each glance sending a little thrill through me that I hadn't felt in years. When he finally approached me again, it was with a glass of Chateau Margaux 1982, my favorite wine, though I couldn't remember mentioning it to him. "A peace offering," he said, "for ruining your shoes." His smile had a hint of mischief that made him look younger than his 34 years. Though I have to confess, it wasn't entirely an accident. I needed an excuse to talk to you. I should have been offended. Instead, I was charmed. It had been so long since anyone had made such an obvious play for my attention. Michael and I had settled into such a comfortable routine that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be pursued. The coincidences started the very next week. Ryan at my favorite coffee shop at exactly 8:30 a.m., just when I always stopped for my morning latte. Ryan at the art gallery I frequented, admiring the same obscure artist I'd been following for years. Ryan at the farmer's market on Saturday morning when Michael was stuck at the office. Each time he said exactly what I needed to hear. When I mentioned feeling stifled by the charity circuit, he talked about the emptiness of social obligations. When I admitted to missing my career in marketing, he called it a crime that someone with my talent was sitting on the sidelines. "You're too vibrant to be just someone's wife," he said during one of our chance meetings. The words struck a chord so deep it almost hurt. Looking back, I see how each encounter was choreographed. The way he always seemed to know my schedule. The way his interests perfectly mirrored mine. The way he'd casually mention things about himself that addressed doubts I'd never voiced. But at the time, it felt like fate. Like finally being seen by someone who understood me. The guilt came, of course. I was a married woman, and here I was looking forward to these accidental meetings with another man. But Ryan never pushed, never crossed any lines. He was just there, consistently, seemingly by chance, offering the kind of connection I'd been missing. Michael noticed, of course. How could he not? But his reaction was so perfectly calibrated that it only added to the tension. He'd mention Ryan at dinner, casual comments about what a great addition he was to the company. He'd invite him to our dinner parties, seated just far enough away from me to make our stolen glances feel illicit. "Ryan speaks very highly of you," Michael said one night as we got ready for bed. "Says you have remarkable insight into people." He smiled that familiar smile. But then I've always known how special you are. The text came 3 weeks after the gala. I know I shouldn't say this, Ryan wrote, but I can't stop thinking about you. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button. In the security footage I've now watched a dozen times, you can see me sitting on our bedroom chaise looking at my phone. You can see Michael in his home office, watching me on his monitor, smiling as I saved the number under a fake name. That night, I dreamed of green eyes and forbidden kisses. In the morning, Michael brought me coffee at exactly 7:15 a.m., kissed my forehead, and said he'd be working late. Again, I didn't know then that every late night was carefully scheduled, every chance meeting meticulously planned, every text monitored and analyzed. I didn't know that Ryan had been given a 50-page document detailing my preferences, my vulnerabilities, my secret desires. I just knew that for the first time in years, I felt alive. And that was exactly what they wanted. It started with innocent texts. Saw that painting you mentioned? You were right about the brushwork. Just had the coffee you recommended. Life-changing. Each message a small thread connecting us, weaving a web I couldn't see forming around me. I created a separate email account for our conversations. Basic cybersecurity, I thought, unaware that my tech executive husband had probably known about it before I even hit create account. Ryan and I moved our conversations there, sharing thoughts about books, art, life. He sent me poems at 3 a.m., exactly the kind of romantic gesture I'd confessed to Michael, years ago, that I'd always dreamed about. Our first real meeting away from chance encounters was at the Modern Art Museum. I told Michael I was meeting my friend Sarah for lunch. He kissed me goodbye, distracted by a phone call, and said, "Have fun with Sarah. Try the new French bistro on 5th. I hear their salads are amazing." Later, I would remember that I hadn't mentioned where we were having lunch. Ryan was waiting by the Rothko exhibit, my favorite artist, of course. He'd bought tickets for a special showing, the kind that had been sold out for months. "I have connections," he said with that boyish smile that made my heart race. We spent 2 hours talking about art, standing close enough to feel the heat between us, but never touching. "Your husband doesn't appreciate your passion for art, does he?" Ryan asked as we studied a particularly striking piece. The question hit home with surgical precision. "Michael appreciates everything about me," I defended, but the words sounded hollow. "Appreciation isn't the same as understanding," he replied softly. "You deserve someone who understands." The texts increased after that. Late-night conversations about our hopes, our fears. Ryan shared stories about his childhood, his struggles, his dreams, each one perfectly crafted to mirror some aspect of my own life. He was like a key made specifically for my locks, fitting perfectly into every empty space in my life. We started meeting for coffee regularly, always in out-of-the-way places where we wouldn't be recognized. I bought a second phone, thinking I was being clever. Each time we met, Ryan escalated our emotional intimacy with the precision of a master chess player. "I shouldn't be telling you this," became his favorite phrase, followed by exactly what I needed to hear. How he couldn't stop thinking about me. How he'd never met anyone who understood him like I did. How guilty he felt about his feelings for his boss's wife. The guilt was eating at me too, but it was mixed with an intoxicating thrill. Every secret meeting, every hidden message, every lingering look felt like I was coming alive after years of sleepwalking through my perfect life. One rainy afternoon, we were sharing an umbrella outside the coffee shop when his hand brushed mine. Just that small touch sent electricity through my body. He stepped closer, and for a moment I thought he would kiss me. "Not here," he whispered. "Not like this. You deserve better than a stolen moment in the rain." It was exactly the right thing to say. Respectful, romantic, restrained. Every move he made was perfectly calculated to draw me in deeper while making me feel like I was in control. Michael was working later than ever, always with a perfectly reasonable explanation. Board meetings, client emergencies, system updates that could only be done after hours. Each late night gave me more time to text Ryan, to dream about him, to fall deeper into what I thought was a genuine connection. "I miss you," Ryan texted one night while I was lying in my empty bed. "I know I shouldn't, but I do." "I miss you too," I replied, my heart pounding. In the footage I've now watched a dozen times, you can see Michael in his home office at that exact moment, reading our exchange in real time, making notes in a file labeled Phase 2. The next day, Ryan suggested we meet somewhere more private. "Just to talk," he said. "I need to see you somewhere we can be ourselves." He mentioned a small boutique hotel downtown, known for its discretion. Next Thursday, Michael has that board meeting in Seattle. I was surprised he knew about Michael's trip, but I brushed it off. Of course he'd know his CEO's schedule. Everything seemed to make perfect sense when you didn't want to see the truth. I said yes. What I didn't know then was that the hotel was already booked. The room was already prepared. The cameras were already installed. Every step I thought I was choosing had been laid out for me months in advance, like a path of breadcrumbs leading straight into the wolf's den. But that's the thing about traps. They work best when you walk into them willingly, thinking it was your idea all along. The hotel room was on the 15th floor, with a view of the city that made everything below look like a miniature model of real life. How fitting, I think now, considering how my entire reality had been carefully constructed by others. That first afternoon crossed a line I could never uncross. Ryan was everything I'd imagined. Tender, passionate, attentive. He kissed me like I was precious, touched me like I was made of glass. Afterward, lying in sheets that probably cost more than a junior executive's monthly salary, I felt both ecstatic and uneasy. "Something feels wrong," I said, not meaning the guilt. "What do you mean?" Ryan propped himself up on one elbow, concern etching his perfect features. "I don't know. Everything's just so..." I struggled to find the words. "Perfect." He laughed softly. "Is that a complaint?" But it wasn't perfect like a dream come true. It was perfect like a script being followed to the letter. Michael's business trips became remarkably frequent after that. Seattle, Singapore, New York, always with perfect timing, always when Ryan was most eager to see me. My husband would call every night, sounding distracted, ending our conversations quickly with convenient bad connections or urgent meetings. "I miss you," he'd say mechanically before hanging up, while I was already thinking about my plans with Ryan. Ryan's presence in my life grew exponentially. He seemed to know my schedule better than I did, appearing exactly when I needed him. If I was having a bad day, he'd show up with my favorite comfort food. If I mentioned wanting to see a movie, he'd have tickets. Every gesture was exactly what I would have wished for, if I'd had time to wish. One day, I found a first edition of my favorite book on my desk at home, a rare copy I'd mentioned wanting during pillow talk with Ryan. When I texted to thank him, his response was strange. "What book?" "The first edition you left on my desk." "I didn't leave anything at your house. I wouldn't risk that." A chill ran down my spine. When I mentioned it to Michael that evening, he smiled. "Oh, that was me. Found it at that little bookshop you love. Surprised you didn't remember telling me about it." Had I told him? I couldn't remember. Memory becomes unreliable when you're living two lives. Strange incidents began piling up. Ryan would mention details about my day that I hadn't told him. He knew about conversations I'd had with friends, about purchases I'd made, about places I'd been. When I questioned him, he'd always have a plausible explanation. "You mentioned it last time," he'd say, or, "I must have seen it on your social media." But I hadn't posted on social media in weeks. Michael's behavior shifted too, in ways so subtle I almost missed them. He started asking more questions about my days, showing more interest in my activities. But his questions felt oddly specific, like he was confirming information rather than seeking it. "How was coffee with Amanda?" he'd ask, on days when I'd told him I was shopping alone. "I didn't meet Amanda today." "Oh, my mistake. Must have been another day." The sex with Ryan remained passionate, but even that started feeling choreographed. He knew exactly what to say, exactly where to touch, exactly how to move. Like he'd studied a manual on my preferences. One afternoon, in another luxury hotel room, always different, always expensive, I noticed something odd about the modern art piece on the wall. The center seemed to reflect light differently than the rest. When I moved closer to examine it, Ryan suddenly pulled me away. "Come back to bed," he whispered. "I need you." That night, I dreamed about cameras. Hundreds of them, hidden in plain sight, watching my every move. I woke up in a cold sweat, but Michael wasn't in bed. The light in his home office was on, and I could hear him talking softly on the phone. "Yes, everything's proceeding as planned," he was saying. "She's exactly where we need her to be." I convinced myself he was talking about a business deal. The alternative was too frightening to consider. But the feeling of being watched, of being manipulated, grew stronger. Ryan's perfect timing, Michael's convenient absences, the way they both seemed to know exactly what I was thinking and feeling. It was like living in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Looking back now, I realized that's exactly what it was. And I was performing my part beautifully, falling deeper into their web with every passing day. The strange thing about being deceived is that even when you start to sense it, you can convince yourself that the deception is better than the truth. What I didn't know then was that both men were meeting regularly, reviewing footage, adjusting their strategy. Every time I felt a moment of doubt, every time I started to question the perfection of it all, they would recalibrate, adapt, ensure I stayed on script. The trap was closing around me, and like all the best traps, it was lined with everything I thought I wanted. The first warning came in an unmarked envelope slipped under my car's windshield wiper. Inside was a printed email thread between Ryan and someone named Marcus, dated 2 years ago. The conversation discussed target acquisition and psychological profiling. One line stood out: "The wife is perfect for this. Everything matches the profile." I confronted Ryan about it that afternoon. "Corporate espionage," he explained smoothly. "It's from a competitor trying to disrupt the company. They're targeting you to get to Michael." He pulled me close, kissed my forehead. "I should have warned you this might happen. The tech world can be brutal." The explanation made perfect sense. Too perfect, like everything else. A week later, I received an anonymous email. "Ask him about Jennifer Morrison in Seattle. Ask him about Patricia Kent in Boston." When I searched those names, I found nothing. Ryan said they were probably fake names created by the same competitors. "Michael's enemies will try anything," he said. "They know his marriage is his strength." But it was Michael's behavior that truly should have set off alarms. No husband should be this calm when working closely with the man sleeping with his wife. During dinner parties, I'd catch him watching Ryan and me interact. His expression not jealous or angry, but analytical. Like he was taking mental notes. One evening, after Ryan had been particularly attentive during a company event, I overheard Michael on the phone in his study. "Yes, the emotional attachment is growing stronger." "No, she's completely invested now." "Yes, proceed with phase 3. When I asked him about it later, he said it was about a new client acquisition. I believed him because the alternative was unthinkable. Then there were the things Ryan knew. Intimate details he couldn't possibly have learned from our conversations alone. He knew about the miscarriage I'd had 3 years ago, something I'd only ever discussed with Michael and my therapist. He knew about my childhood fear of thunderstorms, a secret I'd shared with Michael during our honeymoon. "You must have told me," he'd say when I questioned him. And I'd accept it, because acknowledging the truth would mean facing something too terrifying to contemplate. Sarah tried to warn me too. "Something's not right," she said during one of our tennis matches. "Ryan mentioned things about your childhood that only someone with access to personal records would know." "He's naturally intuitive," I defended. "No one's that intuitive," she insisted. "And have you noticed how he never seems to struggle financially despite his junior position? Those hotel rooms, the gifts, the rare books, it doesn't add up." I stopped playing tennis with Sarah after that. The warnings kept coming. A USB drive appeared in my gym bag containing surveillance photos of Ryan with other women. All of them wealthy. All of them married to successful men. I convinced myself they were photoshopped. Michael's calmness became even more pronounced. When I came home late from working late, he knew I was with Ryan. He'd smile and ask if I'd had a productive evening. When I wore the lingerie Ryan had bought me, Michael would comment on how nice it was, as if he'd seen it before. Once I found a document on our shared home network titled Psychological Profile, CH. Before I could open it, the file disappeared. When I mentioned it to Michael, he said it must have been a client file that got misfiled. Of course, I believed him. I'd become an expert at believing convenient lies. Ryan's knowledge of my life became increasingly intrusive. He bought me a necklace identical to one my grandmother had given me as a child. A necklace I'd lost 20 years ago and had only ever described to Michael. He knew about private conversations I'd had with my mother, about dreams I'd written in my password-protected journal. "We're just so connected," he'd say. "We share the same soul." But souls don't come with surveillance equipment and psychological profiles. The final red flag came 3 days ago. I found a small notebook in Ryan's jacket pocket while he was in the shower. Inside were detailed notes about my routines, preferences, and psychological triggers. When I confronted him, he produced a different notebook, one filled with love poems and random thoughts about me. "Is this what you saw?" he asked, looking confused. "I've been writing about you since we met." I almost believed him. Almost. But later that night, as I lay awake in our bed, I heard Michael's voice from his office. "She found the decoy notebook. Proceed with contingency plan Delta." That's when I finally allowed myself to see what I'd been avoiding all along. I wasn't living a love story. I was living a carefully orchestrated operation, and both men in my life were playing parts in a script I hadn't been allowed to read. The question was, why? What could be worth this level of manipulation? What was the endgame? I was about to find out, and the answer would destroy everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and revenge. It was a Tuesday evening when Ryan first mentioned leaving Michael. We were in our usual hotel room, the one with the abstract painting that I now knew concealed a camera. He had just finished making love to me with his usual calculated perfection when he propped himself up on one elbow, his expression serious. "Let's run away together," he said, as if the idea had just occurred to him. I would later learn this conversation had been scheduled for exactly this moment, scripted down to the last word. "Ryan, I can't just..." "Why not?" He traced my collarbone with his finger, something he knew calmed me. "You're unhappy with Michael. He doesn't appreciate you, doesn't understand you like I do." The words echoed our first conversation at the gallery, a perfect circle of manipulation. Over the next few weeks, Ryan intensified his campaign. He started showing me properties online, beautiful houses in California, each one matching my exact taste. He talked about teaching positions he'd been offered at prestigious universities. Everything was arranged, he said. We just needed to take the leap. "I have money saved," he mentioned casually. "Enough for us to start over comfortably." When I asked how a junior executive could have such savings, he had a ready answer. "Smart investments in tech startups. I learned from the best. Your husband." The pressure mounted daily. Ryan began dropping hints about our future together in every conversation. He'd send links to wedding venues, saying, "Wouldn't this be perfect for a second chance at happiness?" He'd forward listings for art galleries in California, suggesting I could finally pursue my dreams of opening my own space. Each suggestion was perfectly tailored to my secret desires, the ones I'd only ever shared with Michael. "Think about it," Ryan would whisper. "No more hiding. No more pretending, just us, being real together." Michael's behavior became even stranger during this time. He started leaving divorce papers casually visible in his home office. When I found them, he acted surprised. "Oh, those?" "Just updating some legal documents. Nothing important." He began mentioning friends who had gone through amicable divorces and emerged happier. He talked about how life was too short to stay in situations that didn't bring joy. It was like they were both reading from the same script, pushing me toward an inevitable conclusion. Ryan's proposals became more elaborate. One night, he presented a complete dossier of our potential new life. The house he'd bought, already furnished to my taste. The art gallery he'd secured a lease for. Even private school options for future children we'd never discussed. "How did you arrange all this?" I asked, that familiar unease creeping back. "Love makes anything possible," he replied, kissing away my doubts. The pressure peaked last week. Ryan started talking about a deadline. He had to give an answer about the teaching position. We needed to leave by the end of the month. Everything was arranged, new identities, new bank accounts, a new life waiting to be claimed. "I can't keep living like this," he said, his voice breaking perfectly. "I need all of you, or none of you. Choose me, Catherine. Choose us." That night, I found Michael in his home office, laughing quietly while watching something on his multiple monitors. When he heard me, he quickly switched the screens to spreadsheets, but not before I caught a glimpse of what looked like hotel room footage. "Working late?" I asked. "Always," he smiled. "By the way, how was your afternoon meeting with the gallery consultant?" I hadn't told him about meeting Ryan. The next day, I received a package at our usual hotel room. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to California, a key to what Ryan called our new home, and a letter outlining our new life together. The letter detailed things about my hopes and dreams that I'd only ever written in my private journal, the one kept in a locked drawer in my studio. "I know everything about you," Ryan's note read. "I know what you need, what you deserve. Let me give you the life you've always wanted." The words should have been romantic. Instead, they sent a chill down my spine. That evening, I overheard Michael on the phone again. "Yes, she received the package. The target is primed for extraction. Proceed with final phase." It was time to make a decision, but not the one they thought I would make. Because while they'd been studying me, learning my every desire and weakness, I'd finally started seeing the truth behind their perfect performance. The question wasn't whether to choose Michael or Ryan. The question was, how long had they been working together? And what was their real endgame? I was about to find out. And the answer would change everything. The truth unraveled with a single photograph. I found it while searching for a backup drive in Michael's home office, a place I rarely ventured. It had fallen behind his desk, a picture of Michael and Ryan at what looked like a college graduation. They were younger but unmistakable. Their arms were around each other's shoulders, grinning like old friends. The date stamp read 2010, long before Ryan supposedly joined the company. My hands shaking, I started searching deeper. Michael's office had always been off limits. "Client confidentiality," he'd said. Now I knew why. In a locked drawer that his own fingerprint scanner helped me open, I found a file labeled Operation Honey Trap. Inside was everything. Psychological profiles dating back years, surveillance photos of me from before I even met Ryan, detailed records of my daily routines, preferences, fears, and desires. There were transcripts of conversations I'd had in what I thought was complete privacy. Phone calls with friends, therapy sessions, even conversations with myself when I thought I was alone. The most disturbing discovery was a document titled Target Emotional Triggers. It listed everything that would make me vulnerable. My desire for passion, my secret dream of opening an art gallery, my childhood abandonment issues, even my preferred sexual scenarios. Every spontaneous moment with Ryan had been orchestrated using this playbook. But why? The answer came when I found a hidden folder on our home network. Inside were similar files on other women, all wives of wealthy tech executives. Each file documented affairs with Ryan. Each followed the same pattern, and each ended with the same result: massive financial settlements and divorces that devastated their husbands' companies. Ryan wasn't just a con man. He was a corporate weapon. With growing horror, I began checking our house for surveillance equipment. They were everywhere. Cameras disguised as smoke detectors, microphones hidden in light fixtures, data loggers attached to my laptop. Our entire home was a sophisticated monitoring station. In my studio, I found a camera hidden inside my favorite art piece, a wedding gift from Michael. It had perfect view of my desk, where I wrote in my journal. Every private thought I'd recorded had been studied, analyzed, and used against me. The final piece clicked when I accessed Michael's private email using the password I'd seen him enter countless times. There, I found correspondence between him and our competitors' CEOs. Michael wasn't the target of corporate espionage. He was the orchestrator. Ryan was his weapon, and I was just another stepping stone in their larger game. I found video files of their meetings, planning sessions where they discussed my manipulation like scientists discussing an experiment. "She's responding perfectly to the emotional validation," Ryan reported in one video. "Increase the intensity," Michael directed. "She's ready for phase 2. They had mapped out everything. When Ryan would first approach me, when he'd first touch me, even when he'd first say he loved me. Every spontaneous moment had been focus grouped for maximum impact. The sickness I felt was overwhelming, but I forced myself to keep searching, to document everything. I found financial records showing payments to Ryan from offshore accounts, psychological consultation fees, surveillance equipment invoices, even receipts for the gifts Ryan had given me, all paid for by Michael's corporate account. Then I found the endgame document. They weren't planning for me to run away with Ryan. They were setting me up to embezzle company funds, something that would trigger clauses in Michael's corporate contracts, allowing him to absorb his competitors during the resulting chaos. I was just a pawn in a much bigger game. As I sat there, surrounded by evidence of my own manipulation, I heard footsteps. Looking at the security feed I'd discovered on Michael's computer, I saw both of them entering the house together, laughing and casual, like the old friends they were. "Is she ready?" Michael asked. "Almost," Ryan replied. "One more push should do it." "Perfect. The contracts are ready. Once she transfers the funds, everything falls into place." I should have felt angry. Instead, I felt something else. Powerful. Because while they'd been studying me, learning my every weakness, they'd failed to consider one crucial thing. What happens when the experiment becomes aware of the experiment? I closed the files, carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it, and prepared myself for the performance of my life. Because now I had a script of my own. They thought they were playing me. They didn't realize I'd just changed the game. But first, I needed to make a few calls, starting with the FBI's Corporate Fraud Division. I waited 3 days before making my move. 3 days of pretending everything was normal, of playing the role they thought I was still blindly performing. I let Ryan push me about our escape plans. I let Michael act distracted and distant. Every camera in our house recorded exactly what they expected to see. But on the 4th day, I arranged a meeting that would change everything. "Mrs. Harrison," Agent Chen said, studying the evidence I'd gathered. "This is one of the most sophisticated corporate espionage operations we've ever seen." We were sitting in a secure room at the FBI field office, surrounded by the files, photos, and recordings I'd carefully collected. "How many women?" I asked. "We've identified 7 previous operations, all wives of tech executives, all involving Ryan Davidson, or should I say, James Ryan Mitchell. He's actually a trained psychological operations specialist who worked for a private military contractor." The agent slid a photo across the table. Ryan in military gear, looking younger but somehow colder, more himself. "And Michael? Your husband appears to be the mastermind. He's been orchestrating these operations for years. The affairs create vulnerabilities in target companies, which he then exploits during hostile takeovers. Using their wives as pawns," I said bitterly. "You're the first one who caught on," Agent Chen replied. "The others all followed the script. Fall in love, agree to steal company assets, then get caught. The scandals always benefited your husband's corporate maneuvers." I thought about the other women, how they must have felt when they realized the truth. What happened to them? Most lost everything in their divorces. Their reputations were ruined. 2 attempted suicide. She paused. Your husband is very thorough in his destructions." Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. "Made the reservations. 2 days until our new life begins." I showed it to Agent Chen. "They're pushing for the final phase. They want me to transfer $50 million of company funds to what they've made me believe is our escape fund. But actually leads straight to your husband's offshore accounts," she finished. Classic trap. I thought about every kiss, every touch, every whispered promise. All of it calculated, focus grouped, designed to manipulate. The nausea was overwhelming. "There's something else you should know," Agent Chen said quietly. She pulled out another file. "We found this in their operation records. It's the original planning document." I opened it and felt my world tilt sideways. The first page held a psychological profile of me, dated 3 years before I ever met Michael. "He didn't marry you by chance, Mrs. Harrison. You were selected. Your entire relationship was part of a longer con." The room spun. Our first meeting at the charity gala. His perfect courtship. The way he'd always known exactly what I wanted, what I needed. 12 years of marriage, and every moment had been orchestrated. "Why me?" "Your background made you perfect for their operations. Child of divorce, history of seeking male approval, artistic temperament. They identified you as someone who could be manipulated into taking risks for passion." I thought about the life I'd thought was mine, the marriage I'd believed in, the affair I'd thought was my great rebellion. Every choice had been designed, every freedom an illusion. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. Agent Chen laid out the plan. "We need you to proceed with the transfer, but we'll be tracking every dollar. We need recordings of both men discussing the operation. And most importantly, we need you to maintain your cover for 48 more hours." I nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "I can do that." "It's dangerous," she warned. "These men are sophisticated manipulators. If they suspect you know—" "They won't," I said with certainty. "They've spent so long studying my weaknesses, they've forgotten that women like me, women they've underestimated and used, we have strengths they've never bothered to analyze." I stood to leave, but turned back. "Agent Chen? What happens to them when this is over? With the evidence you've gathered?" "Federal prison, for a very long time." I thought about the other women, the lives they'd ruined. Good. That night, I returned home to find Michael in his office, watching the surveillance feeds as usual. Ryan was coming over for dinner, a carefully orchestrated event designed to push me toward my final decision. "Everything okay, honey?" Michael asked, noticing my expression. "You seem different." I gave him the smile I'd practiced in the mirror, the one they'd expect from a woman about to risk everything for love. "Everything's perfect," I lied, and watched as both men exchanged subtle, satisfied glances. They thought they were watching their plan's perfect culmination. They didn't realize they were watching their own undoing, orchestrated by the very woman they'd tried so hard to manipulate. The game was indeed reaching its final phase, just not the one they had planned. The stage was set in our perfectly appointed dining room, the same room where they'd orchestrated countless dinners, watching me fall deeper into their trap. Tonight would be different. Tonight, I was the one watching them. I'd made Michael's favorite meal, opened his best wine. Ryan arrived exactly on schedule, playing his part perfectly. The anxious lover, ready to whisk me away to our new life. They both thought tonight was the culmination of their plan, where I would finally agree to transfer the funds that would trigger their corporate takeover. They didn't know that FBI agents were stationed outside, that every word was being recorded, that their perfect plan was about to implode. "Before we discuss the transfer," I said, setting down my wine glass, "I'd like to hear about how you two met. The real story, not the company line." They exchanged quick glances, so subtle I would have missed it if I hadn't been looking for it. "What do you mean?" Michael asked, his voice perfectly modulated to sound confused. I pulled out the graduation photo and placed it on the table. 2010, wasn't it? Long before Ryan supposedly joined the company. The silence was deafening. I could see them recalculating, adjusting their script. Or should I call you James? I looked at Ryan. That is your real name, isn't it? James Ryan Mitchell, PSYOP specialist? The mask slipped for just a moment. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. It was like watching a different person emerge. How long have you known? Michael asked quietly. No more pretense. Long enough to document everything. The surveillance, the psychological profiles, the other women. I turned to face my husband. Long enough to understand that our entire marriage was just another operation. Michael's laugh was chilling. You were perfect, you know. Every psychological marker we look for. The daddy issues, the artistic temperament, the desperate need for validation. We couldn't have designed a better target if we'd tried. Why? My voice didn't shake. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Business, darling. Always business. Michael stood, pouring more wine with steady hands. Do you know how much easier it is to acquire a company when its CEO is destroyed by scandal? When his wife is caught embezzling funds during an affair? The stock prices plummet, the board panics, and we swoop in to save the company. And I was just another weapon in your arsenal. You were the best one, Ryan interjected, his fake warmth completely gone. The others, they were practice runs. But you? You were the main event. The affair that would give us control of 3 major tech companies. Because of who Michael would become, the wronged husband, the sympathetic figure during the takeover. I finished. You planned this for years. Since before we met, Michael confirmed. Every dinner, every gift, every moment of our marriage was designed to reach this point. Even your little art studio was part of the profile, giving you a dream to chase when the time came. The cruelty of it stole my breath. 12 years of marriage and every moment had been manipulation. What happens now? I asked, though I already knew. Now? Michael smiled. Now you complete the transfer, run away with your young lover, and become the corporate cautionary tale we've designed you to be. The funds are traced to you, the scandal erupts, and I emerge as the victim, perfectly positioned to acquire our competitors at pennies on the dollar. And Ryan? Disappears with a very healthy offshore account. Ryan smirked. While you take the fall. I stood slowly, walking to the window. It's a perfect plan. There's just one problem. What's that, darling? Michael's voice was condescending. I turned back to them. I'm not the only one who's been recording everything. Their expressions froze as FBI agents burst through every door. The look of shock on their faces was almost worth the 12 years of lies. Almost. As they were led away in handcuffs, Michael turned to me one last time. How did you figure it out? You were too perfect, I said simply. Both of you. You studied my weaknesses so carefully, you forgot that being underestimated can become a strength. The aftermath was a media circus, of course. The scandal rocked Silicon Valley, but not the way they'd planned. Instead of a cheating wife, the stories focused on corporate espionage and psychological manipulation. Other women came forward. The scheme unraveled completely. Michael and Ryan were sentenced to 15 years each. The money was traced and returned. The companies they'd targeted survived. And me? I sold the house with all its hidden cameras, used the divorce settlement to open my own art gallery, started a foundation to help other women rebuild their lives after manipulation and fraud. But most importantly, I learned the greatest truth about deception. Sometimes the most dangerous trap isn't the one built with cameras and psychological profiles. It's the one we build ourselves, brick by brick, with our desire to believe in perfect things. I don't believe in perfect anymore. But I do believe in real. And for the first time in my life, that's exactly what I am. Real. Flawed. Free. If this story resonates with you, please like and share it. Your support helps raise awareness about manipulation and corporate fraud. Remember, if something seems too perfect, look closer. The truth usually hides in the flaws we're trained to ignore. Subscribe for more true stories about deception, revenge, and redemption. Because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that teach us to question the perfect facade and embrace our authentic selves. It's been 1 year since the trial that exposed everything. Michael and Ryan's conviction made headlines across the tech world. Tech CEO's elaborate honey trap scheme exposed by wife. The story went viral, but it wasn't the scandal they'd planned. Instead, it became a warning about corporate manipulation and a testament to women's resilience. The other victims reached out to me one by one. Linda from Seattle, whose story mirrored mine. Patricia from Boston, who lost everything before rebuilding her life. Sarah from Austin, who nearly took her own life after the truth emerged. We formed an unexpected sisterhood, bound by our shared experience of betrayal and survival. The FBI investigation revealed the full scope of Michael's operation. 7 destroyed marriages, countless ruined lives, 5 companies decimated by manufactured scandals. The total financial damage exceeded $2 billion. But the emotional cost? That was immeasurable. My testimony helped secure their convictions. Michael got 15 years for corporate fraud and conspiracy. Ryan received 12 years for his role. But sitting in that courtroom, watching these men who had orchestrated every moment of my life being led away in handcuffs, I felt no satisfaction. Only a deep determination to turn this pain into purpose. I used my divorce settlement to start the Glass House Foundation, helping women rebuild their lives after manipulation and fraud. Our first initiative? Teaching financial literacy and psychological manipulation awareness to women in corporate environments. The foundation has already helped hundreds of women recognize and escape similar situations. My art gallery opened last month. I named it Truth in Fragments, because sometimes we have to shatter the perfect illusion to find what's real. The opening exhibition featured works by women who'd survived various forms of manipulation and betrayal. Their art, like their stories, was raw, powerful, and ultimately hopeful. But the real healing? That came from breaking my silence. To everyone who feels the chill of recognition in their own relationships, who questions whether something too perfect might be hiding something too painful, trust your instincts. That voice of doubt deserves to be heard. I share this story not for sympathy, but as a warning flare in the dark. Because somewhere, someone else is living in their own perfect illusion, doubting their own doubts, dismissing their own instincts. Maybe they'll see themselves in these words. Maybe they'll recognize the subtle signs before their own perfect trap closes. If this story speaks to you, share it. Your share might be the lighthouse another soul needs to find their way to shore. If it moves you, let me know. Your words might give someone else the courage to look beneath their own perfect surface. Remember, the most dangerous traps are the ones we walk into willingly, believing they're exactly what we wanted. But the strongest people are those who can walk out, even when the door seems locked. In the end, I learned that real love doesn't need elaborate scripts or hidden cameras. Real love isn't perfect, and that's exactly what makes it real. I am Helen Keller, and this is my true story of deception, betrayal, and ultimately, freedom. The perfect illusion has shattered, and in its fragments, I finally found myself.